I spent 11 years working as a state trooper in rural Kentucky. Most of that time was on the overnight shift, midnight to 8 in the morning. If you've never driven a 2-lane highway through eastern Kentucky at 3 in the morning, it's hard to describe what that kind of dark looks like. There are no streetlights. There are no gas stations. For miles at a time, the only light you have is your own headlights cutting through the tree line, and even that feels like it barely makes a dent. You get used to it after a while, but you never fully stop noticing it. The dark out there has a weight to it. I'd been on the job long enough that I could tell when something was off before I could explain why. Experienced officers talk about that a lot, the feeling you get before your brain catches up. You see something, and something in your gut registers it before you've even consciously processed what you're looking at. That's what happened on a Tuesday night in late October, about 4 years before I retired. I was coming southbound on Route 9, just past a long bend where the road straightens out for about a quarter mile before curving again into a hollow. My headlights swept across something white on the right shoulder, and even before I identified what it was, I was already slowing down. It was a car. A white sedan, older model, sitting on the gravel with no lights on at all. No hazards, no interior light, nothing. Just sitting there, dark. Now, a car on the shoulder at 3 in the morning on Route 9 wasn't exactly unusual. Breakdowns happen. People fall asleep pulling over. Drunk drivers leave their cars and get rides. I'd seen all of it. But something about this one didn't sit right. Maybe it was how centered it was on the shoulder. Not pulled awkwardly like someone had. Rolled to a stop but parked. Deliberate, straight. I pulled in behind it and ran the plates before I got out. The car came back registered to a woman out of Pike County. No warrants, no flags, nothing unusual. I called it in, noted my location, and stepped out. I came up on the passenger side the way we're trained to, staying away from the drivers. Blind spot, keeping the car between me and oncoming traffic, using my flashlight to check the back seat before I got to the front window. The back seat was empty. I moved up to the passenger window and shined my light in. There was a woman in the driver's seat. She was sitting upright, both hands in her lap, eyes open, staring straight ahead through the windshield. She was awake. She wasn't asleep, wasn't unconscious. She was just sitting there looking at the road. I tapped the glass. She didn't react. I tapped it again, harder, and said, "State Police, ma'am. Can you lower your window for me?" Nothing. She didn't even blink that I could see. I went around to the driver's side, tapped the window there. Same thing. She was looking directly ahead like I wasn't there at all. I tried the door handle. It was unlocked. I opened the door slowly and said, "Ma'am, I'm Trooper Holloway with the Kentucky State Police. Are you all right?" I put my hand on the door frame and leaned in slightly, staying out of arm's reach the way you do. She turned her head. It was slow. Not like someone snapping out of a daze, more like someone deciding to look at something they'd been aware of for a while. She turned and looked at me with these completely calm eyes. No fear, no surprise. She said, "I can't go any further." I asked her what she meant by that. She said it again. "I can't go any further down this road." Just like that. Flat. Like she was telling me it was raining. I asked if there was something wrong with the car. She said no. I asked if she was hurt. She said no. I asked where she was trying to go. She told me she was heading to her sister's house in Prestonsburg, which was about 40 minutes south on that route. I asked how long she'd been sitting there. She thought about it. She said she wasn't sure. She said she'd been driving and then she just stopped here because she couldn't go any further. I asked why she couldn't. She looked out through the windshield again, back at the road ahead, and she said, "There's something in the road. I don't want to drive through it." I turned and put my flashlight on the road in front of her car. There was nothing there, just asphalt and the faded center line going on into the dark. I told her I didn't see anything. She said, "I know." I stood there for a second trying to figure out what I was dealing with. Her speech was clear. Her eyes were focused. She didn't smell like alcohol. She wasn't agitated or confused in the way someone having a medical episode usually presents. She seemed completely lucid, like someone having a reasonable conversation about something that made perfect sense to them. I called for an EMS unit, not because I thought she was in immediate danger, but because I didn't want to be wrong about that. While I waited, I asked her to step out of the car, which she did without any resistance. I had her stand by my cruiser and I asked her some questions. She knew what day it was, what year it was, who the president was, where she was going. All correct. I asked her again about what she saw on the road. She said, "I don't know exactly what it is. I just know I can't drive through it. I've been sitting here for a while trying to decide if I could." I asked how long she thought she'd been sitting there. She said maybe 20 minutes. EMS arrived and logged the call time. The time between her call, which she hadn't made, by the way. The call to dispatch had come from another driver who spotted the car, someone who kept going and called it in. The time between that call and my arrival was about 45 minutes. She'd been sitting there for at least 45 minutes in the dark on the side of the road with no lights on, staring at something she said was in the road. The EMS guys checked her out and found nothing physically wrong. Her blood pressure was a little elevated, but not alarmingly. They recommended a psychiatric evaluation. She agreed to go voluntarily. Before they put her in the ambulance, she touched my sleeve. She said, "You're going to drive through there, aren't you?" I said yes. I'd be heading back south on that route when I finished my shift. She looked at me for a second and then said, "Just don't slow down." And then she got in the ambulance and they drove away. I followed up on her 2 days later. She was treated and released. The attending psychiatrist noted a possible acute dissociative episode, possibly stress-related. She had no prior psychiatric history. She told the doctors the same thing she'd told me. She couldn't drive through whatever was in the road, but she could never describe what it was. Here's the part I've thought about the most over the years. About a week after that night, I was talking to an older trooper named Dale who'd worked that route for 15 years before moving to a different district. I told him about the call, just making conversation. He listened without saying anything. When I finished, he said, "Yeah, that stretch." I asked him what he meant. He said, "About a mile past where you found her, there was a head-on collision in 1987, 3 dead. Then another one in 1994, same spot, 2 dead. Then again in 2001, 1 fatality." He said he wasn't superstitious. He said he thought it was probably the road geometry, the way the curve fed into that straight, the way headlights could blind oncoming drivers. But he said in all his years on that route, he'd fielded more calls of drivers pulled over claiming they couldn't proceed than on any other stretch in the county. He said most of them, like her, couldn't explain what they saw. I drove through that section every night for 4 more years. I always remembered what she said, and I never slowed down. Story 2, Unit 4 doesn't respond. I worked night shift dispatch for a county sheriff's office in Central Oregon for 9 years. I know a lot of people think of dispatch as the job behind the job. You're not out in the field. You're not the one knocking on doors. But if you work dispatch long enough, you accumulate your own kind of weight. You hear things before anyone else does. You're the one on the line when someone's crying and the officers are still 7 minutes out. You carry that. But the thing that changed me the most didn't come through a 911 call. It came through the radio system that was supposed to connect me with my own officers. It was a Thursday night in February. We had 4 units out. Deputies: Carver, Mendez, Tolliver, and Reyes. Standard coverage for that part of the county on a weeknight. Nothing unusual was going on. By about 2 in the morning, things had been quiet for a couple hours. I'd cleared a fender bender, handled a noise complaint that resolved without incident, and run a couple of plate checks. The kind of night where you start counting down the last few hours of your shift. At 2:14 in the morning, I attempted to reach Unit 4, that was Deputy Reyes, for a routine welfare check assignment. A neighbor had called about an elderly man next door who hadn't been seen in a couple of days and whose lights had been on all night. Standard stuff. I keyed up and said, "Unit 4, this is dispatch. Do you copy?" Static. I tried again. Unit 4. Do you copy? More static. And then, voice. But not Reyes. It was a man's voice, but it was wrong in a way I found hard to place immediately. The tone was off. Too flat, too measured, like someone reading from a script. The voice said, "Copy. Dispatch." I hesitated for just a second because it didn't sound like Reyes. But radio quality varies. People are tired. Their voice sounds different at 2 in the morning when they haven't spoken in a while. I pushed through it and gave the assignment. I gave the address, the name of the reporting party, the details on the welfare check. The voice said, "Copy, en route." I noted the response time in the log and moved on. About 15 minutes later, I tried to reach Reyes again to get an update on the welfare check. Unit 4, what's your status at the welfare check address? Nothing for a moment. Then the same voice came back. Same flat, measured tone. It said, "Still on scene." I asked if the subject had been located. It said, "Stand by." I waited. A minute passed. I asked again. It said, "Stand by." Something about the word, just that single word, twice, with no additional information in that same flat voice, made the back of my neck prickle. I pulled up the GPS tracker for Unit 4 on my screen. The system showed Reyes's vehicle parked at a turnout on the highway about 12 miles from the welfare check address. He hadn't moved. I tried a different approach. I called Reyes directly, on his cell phone. He picked up on the second ring. He sounded completely normal. A little drowsy, a little surprised I was calling. He said he'd been parked at the turnout writing up some paperwork from an earlier stop. He hadn't heard his radio go off. He said he definitely had not responded to any welfare check. I told him what had happened on the radio. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Who answered on my unit number?" I said I didn't know. He said, "No one else has my unit number." He drove to the welfare check address himself. The elderly man was fine. He'd just had his sleep schedule reversed and had been up watching television late. He'd been a little startled that no officer had shown up earlier because someone had knocked on his door about 20 minutes prior. He described the person who knocked as a man in a dark jacket. He said the man hadn't identified himself as police. He just knocked, asked if anyone was home, and when the man opened the door, the stranger looked at him for a moment without saying anything and then turned and walked away. He said the man didn't have a car. He watched him walk down the street and disappear around the corner. We never identified who that was. We also never identified whose voice came through on Unit 4's frequency. The radio equipment was checked twice and both times came back with no faults. Technically, someone would have needed a scanner and a transmitter keyed to our specific channel to do what was done that night. Not impossible, but specific. Not something a random person stumbles into. The thing that I still think about is the timing. Whoever was listening to our frequency that night heard the welfare check assignment before any unit arrived. They got there first. They knocked on that man's door, checked to see if he was home, and left. Why? I don't know. The only thing I keep coming back to is the standby. That voice said standby twice, like it was stalling, like it needed time to finish something before it let me follow up. I've never been able to figure out what it was doing at that address for those 15 minutes before Reyes arrived. The elderly man said the stranger looked at him for a long moment before walking away. He said the look wasn't threatening. He said it was more like assessment, like the man was deciding something. I transferred to a day shift position 8 months later. I told myself it was for the schedule, but if I'm being honest, it was because I never fully trusted the radio again after that night. And dispatch work where you don't trust the radio is a very specific kind of unsettling that I wasn't willing to sit with anymore. Story 3. The girl at mile marker 31. I was a deputy sheriff in a rural county in northern Montana for 6 years. When people think of Montana, they think open sky and mountains and all of that is real, but there's another side to it that people don't talk about as much: the isolation. There are parts of that state where you can drive for 40 minutes in any direction and not pass a single occupied structure. When something goes wrong out there, you are the only resource available. There's no backup 2 minutes away. There's no hospital around the corner. It's you and whatever you're dealing with and the darkness is about as complete as darkness gets. In my third year on the job, in early November, I was working a stretch of county road in the northwest part of my patrol area. A long, straight road that ran alongside a river for about 20 miles before intersecting with the state highway. It was used mostly by logging trucks during the day, almost not at all at night. I was out there that night because we'd had a report of cattle getting loose from a ranch a few miles up the road, and the rancher had asked for a patrol to check for animals on the roadway. I was moving slowly, around 30 miles an hour, sweeping the shoulders with my spotlight, when my headlights caught something at the edge of the road near mile marker 31. A girl, standing on the shoulder facing the road. She looked to be maybe 10 or 11 years old. She was wearing a light-colored dress, white or pale yellow, it was hard to tell in the headlights, and she was barefoot. In northern Montana, in November, the temperature was in the mid-20s. I stopped immediately. I hit my overheads and got out. I called to her right away. She didn't move. I walked toward her quickly, already calling it in on my radio, giving my location and telling dispatch I had a child on the roadway. When I got close enough to see her clearly, she was looking directly at me. She was small, dark hair, pale, no jacket, no shoes, no visible injuries at first glance. She was shivering noticeably, but she was standing upright and she was looking right at me. I crouched down to get to her level and told her I was a deputy and that I was there to help. I asked her what her name was. She told me her name was Lily. I asked her where she lived. She pointed down the road in the direction I had come from. I asked how far. She said she didn't know. I took off my jacket and wrapped it around her right. Away, barefoot and in a dress in that cold. She needed it immediately. I walked her to my cruiser and got the heat running. I asked her if she was hurt. She said no. I asked her how she got out here. She said she walked. I asked her if her parents knew where she was. She looked at me with this expression that I can only describe as tired. Not like a scared child, but like someone who was exhausted by the question. She said, "My dad is looking for me." I asked where her dad was. She looked out the windshield of the cruiser and said, "He's been looking for a long time." I asked her what she meant by that. She didn't answer. She just kept looking through the windshield. I got back on the radio and had dispatch start running through any missing child reports for the area, the county, the adjacent counties, the state system. While that was running, I asked Lily some more questions. I asked her what grade she was in. She said fourth. I asked her the name of her school. She told me. I asked if she'd eaten. She said she wasn't hungry. I asked if she was cold. She said she was okay now. She was calm in a way that I found genuinely unsettling. A child that age, that late, that far from anything, in that cold, alone on a dark road. The expected response is crying, panic, disorientation. She was none of those things. She sat in the passenger seat of my cruiser with my jacket around her shoulders and watched the road like she was waiting for something. Dispatch came back after about 20 minutes. No missing child reports matching her description. Not locally, not county-wide, not in the state system. I asked Lily her last name. She told me. I had dispatch run it for any registered addresses in the county. Nothing came back. I asked her the name of her dad. She told me his first name. I asked for his last name. She said it was the same as hers. I had dispatch run that name for the county. Nothing. I asked her if she had a phone number for her dad. She said no. I asked if she had a phone. She said no. I asked her how long she had been walking. She thought about it. Then she said, "I'm not sure for a while." I drove her to the county seat, to the sheriff's office, where she was taken in by the on-call social worker. They got her warm food, dry clothes, proper shoes. She was cooperative throughout. She answered every question calmly and gave consistent answers each time. But here's the thing. Over the next 72 hours, despite a thorough search of every database available to us, despite canvassing the area around mile marker 31, despite contacting every school in the state that might match the one she'd named. We found nothing. No record of her father's name in any property record, tax record, or law enforcement file in the county or any adjacent county. The school she named existed, but their records going back 15 years showed no student by her name. The state took custody. Child Protective Services opened a file. She was placed with a foster family while the investigation continued. What I found out later, about 4 months after that night, was that a detective had finally turned up a partial match on the name she'd given. A man with that last name had lived in that county. He had a daughter. He died in a single vehicle accident on that same county road, not far from mile marker 31, 11 years earlier. His daughter had been in the car. She hadn't survived either. The detective who told me this said he didn't know what to make of it. He said the girl in our custody was real, clearly alive, had a documented medical exam, fingerprints on file with CPS. She was real, but he said he'd never been able to explain the rest of it. I only saw Lily one more time. It was at a hearing, about 3 months after I found her, a routine status hearing for her CPS case. She was in a waiting room when I walked in. She looked up at me, and she looked different, more like a normal kid, more color in her face, wearing regular clothes. I was relieved to see that. But when she saw me, the first thing she said was, "He's not looking anymore." I asked her what she meant. She said, "My dad, he's not looking anymore." She said it like it was good news. I nodded and said I was glad she was okay. She smiled a small smile and went back to looking at the floor. I've thought about that night on mile marker 31 more than just about anything else in my career. I don't have an explanation. The girl was real. The cold was real. The road was real. The 11 years between what the records showed and the night I found her, I don't have anything to put there. I've stopped trying to fill it in. Some things just sit open. Story 4. What was in the basement? I was a patrol officer in a mid-sized city in Ohio for 14 years. I want to be clear that I'm someone who operates on evidence. I spent my career dealing in facts, what you can document, what you can photograph, what a prosecutor can stand behind in a courtroom. I've seen things that people try to make strange that have perfectly clear explanations. I'm not the type to embellish or to reach for something unusual when something ordinary fits just fine. What I'm going to tell you happened in my 9th year, on the job, and I still don't have an ordinary explanation for it. I've tried. I've gone back over it more than once. The facts are the facts, and the facts don't resolve into something comfortable. It was a Wednesday night in July, around 1 in the morning. I was working solo. My regular partner was out on medical leave and the department was short-staffed, which was nothing unusual. I got dispatched to a residential address for a report of suspicious activity. The reporting party was a woman who lived across the street. She said she'd seen lights moving in the windows of the house across from her, which had been vacant for about 4 months. The previous tenant had moved out, the landlord was doing renovations, and the place was supposed to be empty. I knew the block. Residential neighborhood, older homes. The kind of street where people know their neighbors and notice when something's off. The woman who called was a reliable reporting party. I'd dealt with her once before, noise complaint, very straightforward person. I pulled up across from the house and sat for a moment looking at it. 2-story single-family home, blue-gray siding, front porch. The windows were dark when I arrived. No lights, no movement, nothing visible. That's not unusual. Whoever was inside, if anyone was, would have likely seen or heard my cruiser and gone still. I got out, let dispatch know I was on scene, and walked up to the front door. I knocked and identified myself. No response. I knocked again. Nothing. I tried the door handle. Locked. I walked around the right side of the house, checking. The ground-level windows as I went, all locked, all dark. The back door was locked as well. There was a basement window on the rear left side of the house, low to the ground, and that one wasn't fully seated in its frame. Not broken, not forced, just sitting slightly open. Not wide enough for most adults to get through easily, but not fully secured either. I called it in, noted the basement window, and requested a second unit to do a proper walkthrough. While I waited, I stayed at the back of the house. That's when I heard it. It was a sound coming from inside the house. Faint, low frequency. At first I thought it was the house settling. Old houses in summer do that, wood expanding in the heat. But it was too regular, too rhythmic. It was happening in a slow, even pattern, like breathing, slow, deep breathing, loud enough to hear through the exterior wall. I put my hand on the siding. I know that sounds strange, but I wanted to see if I could feel vibration, to try to gauge the source. There was a slight vibration. Whatever was making that sound was large enough to produce it. The second unit arrived. Officer Tremont. Someone I'd worked with for years. I told him what I'd heard. He put his ear to the wall and then pulled back and looked at me without saying anything for a second. We entered through the front door with the landlord's emergency contact number. He answered, gave us verbal authorization to go in, and said there should absolutely be no one inside. The first floor was empty. Dusty, half-renovated, drop cloths over furniture, paint cans stacked by the wall. Empty. We moved methodically through every room. Empty. The sound was clearer inside. It was coming from below us. The basement door was in the kitchen. We stacked, up on either side of it the way you do when you don't know what's behind a door, and Tremont pulled it open. The sound stopped. Not like something heard us and went quiet. Not a reaction. It just stopped, mid-cycle, like someone cutting the audio. 1 second it was there, and then it wasn't, and the transition had no logic to it. No trailing off, no sudden intake of breath. Just present, then absent. We went down. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed joists overhead, a water heater in the corner, a furnace that was clearly not running because it was July and there was no reason for it to be on. There was old shelving along one wall with paint cans and tools. There was a drain in the center of the floor. There was one small window on each of the 3 non-door adjacent walls. It was empty. Tremont and I walked every inch of it. We checked behind the shelving. We looked at the ceiling for any access point we might have missed. We examined the drain. It was a standard floor drain, 4 inches across. Nothing unusual, but the floor around the drain was wet, not water, from the drain itself. There was no source of water running. The concrete around the drain was wet, in a roughly circular area about 3 feet in diameter, and within that wet area, there were impressions in what had been fine concrete dust, the kind that settles on basement floors over time and sits undisturbed until something contacts it. The impressions were large, and too distinct, to be water damage or settling. They were consistent with something very heavy resting on that floor for an extended period. 4 distinct points of contact, arranged in a pattern that I couldn't immediately categorize. Tremont photographed everything. We filed the report. The landlord came by the next morning and confirmed that nothing in that basement had been moved, nothing had been brought in, no work had been done in that area. He had been in the basement himself 2 weeks prior, and the floor had been dry, and the dust undisturbed. The impressions in the wet area were real. They were in the photographs. The investigating sergeant looked at the photographs and couldn't explain them either. We marked the case as unfounded. No crime had been committed, no person had been found, no evidence of breaking and entering. The case was closed. What I've never stopped thinking about is the sound. Tremont and I both heard it. We both heard it stop at the same moment, in the same way. In 14 years of law enforcement, I encountered a lot of things I couldn't immediately explain that eventually resolved. A sound that 2 trained officers both hear, that stops with no physical cause, coming from a basement that contains no person or animal or machine capable of producing it. That one hasn't resolved. I've talked to Tremont about it since. We don't talk about it often, but when we do, we always end up at the same place. We both heard it. We both know what we heard, and neither of us has found anything that adequately accounts for it. The house was sold about a year later. It's a family home now, I still drive past it occasionally on my old route, habit more than anything. It looks like every other house on the block, but I don't look at the basement windows. I decided a long time ago that whatever was in that basement that night, I don't want to know what it was. I don't think knowing would make it better. And I've learned in 14 years of this job that there are some doors you walk away from. Not out of fear, just out of the understanding that opening them doesn't always lead somewhere you can come back from the same way you went in.